So first up, I am very happy to introduce Rhona Smith. So Rhona is a volunteer with the 2050 Climate Group, and she currently works as a grant program manager for an environmental charity. So she's previously worked in the public sector in various roles that are focused on waste, recycling, climate change, green infrastructure. She has a master's degree in environmental sustainability from Edinburgh University, and she's interested in climate change, adaptation, and sustainable transport and climate justice. So welcome, Rhona. I'm just going to unshare my screen so I can share your slides. But yeah, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Freya. It's great to be here. And I'm just going to share out my screen as well.
Perfect.
Hope everybody can see that. Can you see the right one, or are you just seeing mine?
We can see your notes as well.
Yeah, okay, let me just fix that. One sec. Is that okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great. Right, well, thanks very much for the introduction. That was really nice of you guys to have us here. As you said, I'm Rhona, and I'm here today representing the 2050 Climate Group, who I've been volunteering with for just over a year now. And in my sort of day job, I work for the Woodland Trust as a grant program manager. So yeah, I'm delighted that 2050 Climate Group have been asked to present you today. It's a really fantastic opportunity to link up with sort of like-minded organisations and examine the role that young people can play in climate decision making. So I will start with explaining a little more about who 2050 Climate Group are and what they do, and then I'll go on to discuss what role local councils play in tackling climate change, and finally I'll share some of the work that we've been doing ourselves in the run-up to the local council elections. So to start with, 2050 Climate Group are a volunteer-led, youth-run charity, empowering, equipping and enabling young people to take action. And you can see our three key aims on the slides here. So since about 2014, we've been working to empower Scotland's young leaders to lead action on tackling our climate crisis. And we do this through a number of different sort of work streams. We deliver a number of projects to achieve these sort of aims. The Young Leaders Development Programme is our main sort of body of work, and that equips young leaders with the knowledge and skills they need to take action on climate change. And this takes the form of a six day-long modules over sort of 6 to 9 months that cover a wide sort of breadth of topics. We also have our Leaders Network, which empowers young people to take ongoing climate action after they've been through the Young Leaders Development Programme. So they can take this action in their sort of different spheres of influence. And I think the current membership at the moment now of the Leaders Network is about 688, and it's growing every year. We also do work in Malawi. So our work there is sort of mutual exchange, which helps to empower our youth climate leadership out with Scotland. And then finally, our policy engagement enables young people and young leaders to influence systemic change on climate action. So I'll now go into a little bit more detail on our policy influencing work, because that's kind of what we're talking about today in terms of the local elections. So what we sort of do as volunteers, the sort of main aim of 2050 Climate Group is to promote and support young people in climate action. And we have many different subgroups which work to achieve this in different ways. So I'm part of the policy subgroup. And when we talk about climate policy, we're mostly talking about local, national, and international politics and governments and the course of action that they're sort of committed and committing to take in tackling climate change. So the policy subgroup focuses on ensuring young people are given a seat at the table for policy making decisions, and that your voices are heard by those making those decisions. And this mostly involves working with the Scottish Government, but can also include local councils or even the UK government. And how we tend to do this is to find different ways to hear from young people. So this would include surveys, focus groups, running events, etc., and to bring all those sort of opinions together. We then share the views of young people with the decision makers themselves. And this often takes the form of things like a consultation, but can also include giving evidence in the Scottish Parliament or meeting with other decision makers. So why do we do things this way? Well, our main aim is that we want to be a critical friend to decision makers in the policy subgroup, and we're passionate about ensuring that young people's voices are heard in policy making. And by being that sort of critical friend, this enables us to build connections and get a seat at the table when new policy or legislation is being planned. This gives us a sort of presence the whole way through the policymaking process, but still allows us to be honest about the way that young people feel decision makers are handling the climate crisis, which, as we all know, is not great sometimes. So it gives us a seat at the table to share young people's views. So, for example of some of the consultations that we've done, here are some of the Scottish Government's ones that we've responded to as a group in the recent years that you can see on the slide now. And these cover transport, food, energy, more, and this is in both local and national contexts. So we target our work by identifying consultations that are currently live on the Scottish Government's consultation hub or similar for local councils or whatever, and also any other bodies that are running consultations. So sometimes the focus is really clearly climate related, and then sometimes the focus is maybe less obvious. But as the climate crisis tends to sort of sit above most policy issues, we try to cover as many different subjects as we can as sort of volunteers. You know, we obviously have limited resource, but we try to cover as much as we can. These are a few examples of some of the other types of engagement work that the policy team does. So we give evidence to parliamentary committees. We did engagement with COP. Last year, we produced an analysis of the manifestos ahead of the Scottish parliamentary elections to see where each party stood on climate-related issues and youth issues. And we also attend events to represent young people as well. So an example of that would be the Royal Scottish Geographical Society's Climate Emergency Summit, which we attended. And this leads pretty nicely onto our work on the Scottish council elections. So as many of you know, as we know now, on Thursday, 5th of May, anyone registered to vote can vote to elect their local councillor. And as Naomi and Freya were alluding to earlier, councils have a lot more power and responsibility than you might think. And they particularly impact a lot of issues that respond to the climate crisis. And, you know, they make decisions that impact our day-to-day lives. Yet 1 in 5 councils, UK councils, have no climate action plan, and around 34% had not committed to even reaching net zero by a specific date. So we all know there's clearly work to be done in pushing climate change up the agenda in local government. And through voting, young people can play a really vital part in this. So next, I'm going to highlight 3 issues that councils are responsible for, discuss what councils do and what role they play in tackling climate change. So first example is probably transport, and this is a big focus for some of the consultations that we've responded to. Reducing our transport emissions is one of the biggest challenges facing Scotland, and transport accounts for 36% of our total emissions, with very little progress made to reduce this in the last 30 years or so. So local councils in Scotland, though, can play a big part in reducing our transport emissions. They do have the control to. So you may remember during the early stages of the pandemic, the Spaces for People projects sort of popped up everywhere across Scotland, which gave more space for people to walk and cycle. And long-term visions of these projects is possible and could help encourage people out of their cars and towards active travel. So sometimes it's just about scaling up those kind of solutions. And having efficient and cost-effective public transport is another way to encourage people to live more sustainably in general. And from July of this year, councils in Scotland will, for example, have the power to run their own bus services. So this could make a huge impact to reducing emissions from transport. Next, waste. I think girls mentioned this earlier, but councils in Scotland have a duty to prepare waste management plans, which are then approved by the Scottish Government. This includes how they will collect and dispose of waste, including what will be recycled. So they're also responsible for keeping streets and public places free of litter. And litter might not be the highest emitter of climate changing emissions, but it can be really dangerous to local wildlife, which we know is a priority for our local communities. And then another example of something that local councils have control over is education. And, you know, as they mentioned earlier, councils are responsible for the day-to-day running of schools. This can have a really significant impact into how things are taught, even though they don't have control of the curriculum. They've still definitely got a role to play. So at 2050, we're really passionate about ensuring that all young people get a climate education, and things like education projects run by councils or school trips can have a positive impact in ensuring that young people understand the climate crisis from a young age. And yeah, here at a Youth Link event, we obviously have to mention youth work as well. And it's a great way for young people to learn about climate change and what they can do about it. And your council may have youth work projects that they run or support that you could get involved in. that's all to say that in terms of the local elections, young people do have a stake and in the future, and you can use your vote to influence change at a local level and choose who represents you and who represents your local community. So it's really important to get involved in. I'll talk a little bit now about what we're doing in the run up to local elections. So in addition to encouraging young people in our network to vote in the run up to the elections, the policy team at 2050 Climate Group are working hard to ensure that the priorities of Scotland's young people are highlighted and heard, not only during the elections, but also factored into the policy decisions that councils take over the next term. As such, we're asking our leaders network and young people like anyone attending today from across Scotland to fill in a sort of short survey to tell us what your priorities are for the council elections this May. And when the survey closes, we'll then analyse the results of the survey, collate them into a sort of cohesive report that will be shared with council leaders during and after the elections to encourage them to actively engage with the views of like young people such as yourself. So it's almost like go out there and vote, fill in the survey, and then we can emphasise what young people are wanting out of these elections. So today I'd like to share some sort of provisional results from the survey with you. It's still open, so I'll encourage you to fill it in, but some sort of provisional results that we're seeing across the survey. Firstly, we had responses from about 16 out of the 32 local authorities in Scotland, so about half, but the majority of these responses were from Glasgow and Edinburgh. An important finding which I noticed was, and really demonstrates the need for the work we're all doing, was that 78% of young people who responded do not feel like the local council engages that young people on climate change at all, which I think like really demonstrates the need for our work and the need for young people to get more engaged. But also that local councils need to be pushing it. It's not all down to the young people to go out and find that information. There's a lot of work that councils need to do to bridge the gap and get more people involved and get more young people involved in decision making. Another sort of result that came out was when asked what's the sort of one thing you'd like to see your council do to tackle the climate crisis in the next 5 years, we got like a wide variety of responses, but the general emphasis was mainly on infrastructure, public transport, active travel, and energy efficiency, which is obviously a huge topic right now and one that's really important to be considered in the elections. Finally, when asked, are there any ways your local council can further engage young people in decision making, we got a good number of quality responses, and you can see some of them on the slides right now. So loads of suggestions and good ideas, such as, you know, encouraging youth participation, decision making, outreach work, hold youth focused climate hustings, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's going to be really useful to have this survey and the results and analysis of it to present back to decision makers. So I'll ask you again, it'd be great if anyone here could fill in the survey. It'll widen our reach as much as possible and ensure that as many young people's views are taken into account. And if you don't have the time, then that's fine. It shouldn't take too long, but just getting out and vote is the best message to send right now. The survey is closing quite soon, I think tomorrow or maybe early next week. So I'll post a link in the chat after this if anyone wants to fill it in. Other opportunities to engage with us. If you're interested in engaging with us any further, you can get involved through participating in our Young Leaders Development Programme, which I mentioned earlier. Each sort of programme has about 130 participants, and it's done annually and takes place over sort of 6 to 9 months. So applications will open relatively soon for 18 to 35-year-olds. And if anyone's interested, keep an eye out on our social media or just contact me or contact us in general, and we'll be able to give you some information. But it's a great opportunity to get involved in. And finally, we're also currently recruiting for volunteers for the policy subgroup right now, just so we can ramp up the work we're doing. So if you're interested in helping other young people have a voice in political decision making, then please consider joining us. We don't require any skills or qualifications, just enthusiasm and sort of willingness. I'll put the link in the chat for that as well. But personally, you know, I can highly recommend it. I didn't know a lot about politics before I joined, but I was, you know, enthusiastic and keen to help. So I feel like I've gotten loads out of volunteering for 2050 Climate Group, and it's personally encouraged me to get much more involved in politics. So I think that's it from me. Thanks so much for listening, and please let me know if you have any questions in the chat. I know we're a bit short.